You look good, man. You look real good.
For those of you who don't know, the hill climb season is a UK-centric post-road race season blowout. It lasts from the beginning of September to the end of October. The idea is pretty simple. You just find a hill and see who can ride up the fastest. Riders set off in 1 minute intervals. It's basically an uphill time trial. Part of the attraction of hill climb season is there's no UCI weight limit on how light your bike can go. So this kind of attracts a lot of obsessive tinkerers and people that like to play with the bikes and to get them as light as possible. There's often some really interesting mods that you'll find at a hill climb race. I've been hill climbing for 4 seasons now, and each year my bike's got progressively lighter. In 2015, I used a super light Rose road bike. Then in 2016, last year, I used something a little bit different and more interesting. I used an aluminium custom fixed gear bike. After using the fixed gear, it was really good fun. I really enjoyed it, but it still felt like it came with some compromises, even though it was really light. So for this season, this year, I wanted to go back to gears. Not only did I want to go back to gears, but I wanted to have a gear bike that while it was really light, it also wasn't kind of compromised in any way. I wanted it to be as stiff as a normal road race bike, and I didn't want any kind of noodly, uber weight weenie parts that I'd be worried were gonna fall apart or I was gonna puncture on super light tyres and stuff like that. So with that in mind, I went about sourcing a lightweight carbon road bike.
This dodgy lad.
I started with a stock Fuji SL 1.5. It came with SRAM force group set and Fuji's own brand oval finishing kit. And for a stock build, it was pretty light. It was about 7 kilos for a size large, and it went up to 7.3 once I put some Shimano Dura-Ace pedals on. For a dedicated hill climb bike, that's not the lightest, meaning it was time for some upgrades. First place most people start when licensing up their bike is the wheels, and I was no different. Schmolke sent us some TLO 30 tubular wheel sets. TLO stands for the lightest one, so as you can imagine, very light, coming in at 940 grams for the pair. Now, you can go a bit lighter than this. You can get wheels down to sort of 760 if you really want to kind of push the limits of weight weenieism. But as I said, I didn't want something super needly with a really thin rim profile or an incredibly low spoke count. I needed something that sort of sat in the middle of those two, something that was strong but was still fairly light. For me, the Schmolkes were just the ticket. They had a 25.4mm rim profile, a 30mm depth and a 105 kilo weight limit. That means they were fairly wide, so nice and stable with wider tyres, and with a 105 kilo weight limit, it means they're nice and stiff. During hill climbs, they're fairly short. You're often going to be putting out 600 watts, 700 watts for sort of extended periods of time, and you need something that's going to kind of handle those kind of forces going through the bike. Next up was tyres. Again, many hill climbers opt for paper-thin track tyres. These are really light. They can come as low as 160 grams, 150 grams, but there's always a worry you're going to puncture them. I wanted something much wider, so I went for Continental Podium TT tubulars in 25mm size. I was also lucky enough that Continental sent me their Pro-only Podium TT tubulars that have a latex tube instead of the standard butyl one. That makes them a little bit lighter. They're still not the lightest, but they roll really fast and they have a degree of puncture protection. So with those tyres, I felt like I again had a good balance of reliability and out-and-out speed. SRAM's force group set is already pretty light for a second tier group set, but if you want to save every last gram, obviously you're going to upgrade to SRAM Red. Finishing kit was Dada Superleggera bars. They're only about 30 grams lighter than the stock oval ones, but every little counts. I saved a lot of weight on the saddle and post. I used my MCFK bits from last year. Fuji frame was a 56, a large, but it still felt a bit cramped for me, so I wanted to put a longer stem on. I wanted to go from 100mm to 120. So I called in a stem from an Italian brand called Extra Light. It's a pretty impressive bit of kit because it's made from aluminium, but in 120mm size, it weighs 88 grams, which is it's crazy light for an aluminium stem. And apparently, Extra Light say you can use it for cross-country and even enduro. That sounds a bit scary to me, but for road riding, for a weight weenie build, it was just the ticket. For brakes, we used Cane Creek EE brakes. They weigh almost half the weight of the standard force calipers that come with the bike, so it's a good weight saving there. They're probably not quite as powerful as super powerful brakes like Shimano Dura-Race, but for hill climbs, you don't need to be worrying about stopping basically. I'm often asked with these hill climb builds, why don't you just take the rear brake off? Under CTT rules, which is the UK Time Trial Association, you have to have 2 brakes on your bike. If you ride a fixie, you can just run a front brake because the rear hub counts as a back brake. But if you have a geared bike or a single speed bike with a freewheel, you need to have 2 brakes, and that's why. I've been using Shimano road pedals basically since I've started cycling, so I was really reluctant to change, but we managed to get hold of some Time Espresso 15 pedals. Now these are less than half the weight of the Shimano Dura-Race that I normally use. So while it did take me a little bit of time to get used to clipping in, the weight saving was a no-brainer really. Cranks were the same Rotor M-Power single-sided power cranks I had on my fixie last year. When you're hill climbing, it's really easy to set off too fast when you've got all that adrenaline, and you just end up heading off at like 800 watts for the first 30 seconds. And within about 2 minutes, you've blown and you end up dribbling over the line just like, ooh. So having a power meter is really good, just to help you pace the first kind of minute, 30 seconds of the climb. The last 2 mods were removing the bar tape and converting it to a 1x drivetrain. You're not worrying about comfy hands when you're climbing up hills, so removing the bar tape is a small but easy weight saving. Most people do it. Another thing a lot of riders do is that they cut their bars just under the shifters, again saving a tiny bit of weight. I don't think Deda would have been very happy if I'd sawed their bars in half, so that was a mod I was not willing to make. Obviously, converting to a 1x drivetrain saves a lot of weight, but it also helps with gear choice. For the shorter, faster UK hill climbs, you actually end up going pretty quickly. And if you run a sort of a compact or a mid-compact, let's say a 36 or a 34 in a chainring, you actually find that you can run out of gears or even just have a very extreme chain line. So a lot of hill climbers actually run a relatively large chainring on the front, something like a 40 or even up to a 44 for the really fast courses. I don't churn huge gears, so I chose a 40-tooth Hope narrow wide chainring. This gave me a good spread of gears for the kind of faster and slower bits of most of the courses. And obviously, being narrow wide, I eliminated some of the risk of dropping the chain. So with all that fancy spec, final weigh-in on the bike was 5.3 kilos. So I saved basically 2 kilos off my original build. That's really light, and I was really pleased to get it that light while I felt not compromising on any of the kind of stiffness and performance of the bike. So yeah, basically it was a bike that gave me no excuses when it came down to the big day, which is the National Hill Climb Championships, which always takes place on the last Sunday in October. This year it took place at Headley on the Hill, which is a climb in Northumberland. I think the average was around 7%, so not mega steep, and it had a few fast sections and a few sort of steeper ramps. And the winners were looking for around 4 minutes. I kind of know where I sit in the pecking order of the really fast people, so I was aiming for around 4 minutes 20 and hopefully a finish in the top 20 as well. You always get a bit nervous on the big day and you're kind of worried about how you're going to go and how much it's going to hurt. This climb also had the sort of technical aspect of a lot of gear shifts for all these ramps, so I'd pre-ridden it in the weeks before with my colleague Ruben, and we'd gone to practice and sort of get all our gear shifts dialed in basically, because there'd be a lot throughout that climb. On the day, there was a really nice tailwind blowing up the climb. This helps me a lot because I do a lot of climbing out the saddle. I'm not very aero, so if there's a headwind, I always struggle. I was really pleased with my race run on the day. I think I finished in a time of 4 minutes 17, there or thereabouts, and I finished 17th in the men's category. For those power nerds, I averaged, I think it was like 465 watts, and at the time I weighed 62 kilos. To give you an idea of what it takes to win one of these things, the winner was Dan Evans, and he averaged around 500 watts for just under 4 minutes, and he weighs about the same as me. So I think his watts per kilo was around 8 watts per kilo for 4 minutes. So it shows that to be really competitive and to win at hill climbs, you've got to be incredibly strong. So yeah, that's another hill climb season done, and I've been eating cakes and chocolate ever since. On the whole, I was really pleased with how the bike performed throughout the season. At the start, I had some criteria. It needed to be super light, but it also needed to have an air of practicality. And with the mods I made and the parts I sourced, I felt like I achieved that goal. If I wanted to make it really practical, I probably would have chosen Schmolke clinchers over the tubs, and then you probably could have ridden that bike anywhere. Even with that single 42 chainring, during all my training, I never felt like I was too under or over geared. So yeah, chuck some bar tape on it, chuck some clinchers on, and that would be an almost everyday bike. And before you say anything in the comments about why don't you just have a poo before you do the hill climb and save all the weight there, well, I did have a big poo and I saved all the weight, so there you go.